So there are 791 metadata data categories, and I will show two showcases more language, focus on language and name, but there are more mappings possible, of course. And these mappings are inspected using the semantic mapping component that my co-author has developed. And it allows the metadata modeler to explore the semantic overlap between the profiles and the components, so how things are looking together. So if you look at language, there are two main language data categories, and there are also the core ones. They are linked together in the relation registry, and together they give a nice graph. They link together 80 profiles. So you see here in green the data categories which have the same S or near same S relationships. Here are all the profiles that they link. So using the language facet in the facet browser, actually we are accessing all these profiles, which can have with different structures, but still we can talk about them and access them on a generic level based on these semantic mappings. There are some other related language data categories, like source language and language model, so that is the model language of the language the model spoke. You could include them, but they are of a bit different nature, so they will increase your recall, but they are less specific. So that would be something that is up to the user to include in his, to say that he wants this more fuzzy search of all languages. This is name. Name is much more ambiguous, of course, so there are 72 elements using that term, and there are many different data categories related to these elements. So if you would do just a search on name, you would get very heterogeneous results. But if you use the concept links, you can get much more specific, and that's what also is used by several search engines in the academic domain. Is basically if you type search on the name, you can first get a list of the data categories involved with them, and then the user drills down using the data categories. So the concept actually gives already context, but you could also infer a bit more of the context on how the structure is in the structure of the metadata schema. But this is something that we are now touching a bit on in the future. So that is actually my last slide. So the CMBI infrastructure is very flexible with regard to metadata structure, but it gives already an integrated semantic layer to achieve this semantic interoperability. All these registries are basically in place, and they prove to be useful. We can see that in how the central Term catalog at the moment works. And the users can search and navigate this metadata based on the semantics. And they are, the fact that there is lots of structural diversity in the metadata schema, they are not seeing that. So it means that the archives and the original scientists that create this data, they can stick very close to how they do this data. But there is clearly, sometimes we need a bit more context also, because the data categories are defined to be generic and reusable, sometimes we need a bit for this ambiguity. So there is some work to be done. For meta-modelers, sometimes all this diversity is a bit overwhelming. So there it is perceived that there is a lot of proliferation. We can do things there, and we are doing things there to make it clearer and to allow them to clearly see what is the difference between these two components which have exactly the same name, for example, but have to allow them to see the semantic overlap and the differences. So this semantic mapping component, the browser from the semantic mapping component is inside already. And also we want to include their statistic based on the instance data, so you can really see what is happening in the current data, and that will also help you to choose which components to use, because, well, if a component is still in the registry, but there is actually no data generated with it, then probably you should not be using it.
the evolution of an application. So
Yes.
it's 124 right now. Would you say that the more the better, or there is
There is a balance. There has to be a balance there. So I think that the few ones that we had in the past, basically, the standards one, that was not clearly not enough. And now we have much more, but now it's a bit overwhelming, at least for the metadata modelers. It's hard. If a new center enters into declaring community, he sees the component registry and he sees 124 profiles, where sometimes there's large overlap in what they describe. They are a bit lost. Because also a bit because they come from the mindset that there should be prescribed metadata schemas, that an infrastructure should say you should use these and these, which is not the case in this. You are allowed to create your own. But it's not. Still, we want to foster, of course, reusability, reuse of components at least. So there could be more profiles. I don't have much problem with there, but if they reuse as much components as possible. But so I'm still on the sense that the flexibility should be there, but there's also clear now that there is a move towards let's have a look and see if we should monitor that a bit more closely, and that we encourage reuse a bit more than just expanding. So I think that there is. You should not just be growing.
So you have 120 files, and you have one metadata editor for each of these files to edit metadata records.
Sorry.
So you have one metadata editor
No,
for each of the files, or you have one and you can customize it to serve one specific scheme?
Yeah, we have a generic editor that knows how to load these kind of profiles and then gives you a generic editor. Some people just use Oxygen, but we also have a more editor aimed at the user. But there are also, there are several, so Clarin is a European project, so we're in the Netherlands and in Germany, they are very active. And so like in Germany, for example, they have built they build editors per profile, basically. They have a very XForm driven, they can generate basic structure from a profile and then they tweak it a bit for a specific profile. So there are several approaches to it. So we provide one generic editor that everybody could use for any profile, but there are groups that say we only have these 2-3 profiles in our archive and they build a dedicated editor.
In terms of the profile flexibility, can I have a profile with only one component? Is there a core profile that actually I need to comply with 2 or 3 components before I do something else?
There are some. There are experiments. So you can have a profile with just one component, and there are experiments in. Let's say that for the basic resources, everybody is basically free to do. We see that there is now a problem in here with granularity. So some people just give metadata for their collections, and others give metadata for items within these collections. And then that is not always clear in the catalog, so the user doesn't really see it. So one idea is to say these collection levels should have a mandatory component, and then we can see, okay, this is a collection level. There are other solutions for that. You could also say there should be a link to a data category that says, okay, this is a collection type thing. Another, when we do that is we have web service workflow change in Clarin, and these workflows have to, the web services or the workflow systems have to access these web services. So the web service has to be described somehow. So and there it is hard if there are 20 different descriptions. So what we did is build there a core model in CMBI. Then people can actually make changes to that again, but we validate that it's still valid according to the core model. But this is a layer a bit on top of CMBI. So there is nothing internally into CMBI that enforces.
How do you manage the reuse of components?
Yeah, well, so at the moment they are basically free to, if you are in the component registry, you see all the existing components and you can search and you can browse them. And people can take it and make a copy, for example, and then edit it a bit. But what currently is lacking, there are a list like recommended components and so on, but the component registry itself doesn't have really the features yet to encourage that much inside. So if you're in the component registry, it's hard to see which are the recommended components. So then it comes down to how well are you in the CMBI community and know all these things because you were there. So there's certainly steps to be taken there in a more like community management layer. Thank you.
So our next presenter is Chalice Bartolo. He is a researcher at the National Technical University of Athens. After the undergraduate studies in economics and computer science and his postgraduate degree in economics and web science, he joined the Department of Cultural Informatics at the University of Athens. In 2009, he served as model chair on the first Web Science Conference and co-founded the Master in Web Science at the Mathematics Department of Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. In 2011, initiated the Public Spending Project, which provides real-time information on public expenditures worldwide through visualization and linked open data provision.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Unfortunately for me, I'm not the author of this very nice work. I've worked together with these very interesting people from Spain for other work, but they didn't manage to be here today. So I'll try to be a good seller, but for sure I'm not going to be a good analyst on all the components. So I'll try to keep it brief and give the idea in the major points of the work about creating quantitative indexes, especially the RDF index that the Spanish team has created. So this short presentation is divided in related work, the main contribution, the index itself, evaluation discussion about the index, and of course the conclusions and some ideas for future work, coming from statistics community or other quantitative discipline. Many times we want to create an index from different sources. Let's say that we want to measure the health index in a particular state or country. So the researcher comes up with an idea to combine from different sources, let's say from World Bank or from a different database, in order to make a composite quantitative index. So the idea is the creation of valuable information and policy making propositions in most indexes is the underlying idea. That's the main scope and aim of the index. The problem is that every different department, discipline, or source use different